Welcome to the wonderful world of suburban warfare, folks. Let me tell you about the time a suburban dictator decided she knew more about botany than the United States government, and how that belief upgraded her wardrobe to an orange jumpsuit. I bought my house for one reason and one reason only. It was not the school district because I do not have kids. It was not the open concept kitchen because I mostly eat over the sink like a goblin. It was the backyard. This property sat on a half-acre lot that backed right up to a protected wetland reserve. But the crown jewels of the property were three massive, gnarled, ancient trees sitting right on the back property line. To the untrained eye, these trees looked like something out of a Tim Burton nightmare. They were twisted, covered in moss, and dropped weird spiky cones. They were not the perfectly manicured, sterile Bradford piers that line the rest of the Stepford-style streets in this neighborhood. To a suburbanite obsessed with symmetry, my trees were chaos incarnate. But to me, a man with a master of science in ecology and a specific focus on conservation biology, they were masterpieces. More importantly, they were the nesting ground for a very specific, very endangered species of bat. I knew exactly what I was buying. I had the surveys. I had the federal declarations. I had a binder thick enough to stop a bullet that detailed exactly why those trees could never be touched. Enter Patricia. Patricia was the president of the Homeowners Association. If you looked up the word sour in the dictionary, you would find a picture of Patricia sucking on a lemon while judging your lawn ornaments. She was a woman who had never heard the word no in her entire life without immediately asking to speak to a manager. She had the haircut. You know the one. The inverted bob that screams, "I am about to ruin your shift." She wore floral print blouses that cost more than my car, but looked like sofa upholstery from 1993. My first interaction with Patricia happened 3 days after I moved in. I was in the driveway unpacking a box of books when I heard the distinct sound of flip-flops slapping against the pavement at an aggressive tempo. Excuse me, sir." I turned around. Patricia was standing at the edge of my driveway, hands on her hips, inspecting my moving boxes like she was a customs agent looking for contraband. "Hi," I said, putting on my best neighborly smile. "I am Jason. Just moved in." "I know," she sniffed, looking down her nose at me. "I am Patricia, president of the HOA. We usually require new residents to check in with the board within 24 hours of arrival." "You are late." I blinked. "I literally just got the keys yesterday afternoon." "Rules are rules, Jason," she said, waving a manicured hand dismissively. "Anyway, I came over to talk about those things in your backyard." She pointed a long, accusatory finger toward my beloved ancient trees towering over the roofline. "You mean the trees?" I asked. "If you want to call them that," she scoffed. "They are hideous. They look dead. They are bringing down the property value of the entire cul-de-sac. The Smiths next door have been complaining about the leaves for years. Now that the house has an owner again, we expect you to deal with them." "Deal with them?" "Remove them," she said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Cut them down, grind the stumps, put in some nice cypress or maybe a retaining wall." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud, which was my first mistake. Patricia did not like being laughed at. Her face went a shade of red that clashed horribly with her blouse. "I cannot do that, Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "Those trees are hundreds of years old. They are actually a significant part of the local ecosystem. Plus, I like them. They give great shade." She narrowed her eyes. "Listen to me, you smug little man. This is an HOA. We have standards. We have aesthetics. Section 4. Paragraph 2 of the bylaws clearly states that owners must maintain their landscaping to the satisfaction of the board. Those trees are an eyesore. I am giving you a friendly warning. Get rid of them, or we will start issuing fines." She turned on her heel and slapped her way back down the driveway, leaving a cloud of cheap perfume and entitlement in her wake. I went inside and immediately pulled out my binder. I checked the HOA covenants. Sure enough, there was a vague clause about landscaping maintenance. But here's the thing about laws. Federal law trumps state law trumps local law, and absolutely everyone trumps a power-tripping HOA board member with a clipboard. The Endangered Species Act of 1973 is a very powerful piece of legislation. It is essentially the nuclear option of environmental law. And my trees? They were the primary habitat for the Indiana bat, a species that is federally endangered. Touching those trees, harassing the bats, or even altering the habitat significantly without a permit from the United States Fish and Wildlife Service is a federal felony. I decided to play the long game. I did not run over to her house and scream about bats. I did not wave my degree in her face. I simply sent a polite email to the HOA board email address. Subject regarding tree removal request. Dear Board, thank you for the warm welcome. Regarding the request to remove the mature trees in the backyard of 42 Oak Street, I am unable to comply due to environmental restrictions. Best, Jason. Short, sweet, vague enough to be annoying, but truthful. 2 days later, the first fine arrived. $50 for failure to maintain landscaping. I framed it. I put it right on the wall in my office. Over the next month, the war escalated. Patricia would stand on the sidewalk and stare at my house, taking notes. I would wave. She would scowl. I got fines for my grass being half an inch too high. I got fines because my trash can was visible from the street at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday. I paid them all without a word. I wanted her to think I was a pushover. I wanted her to think she was winning. Then came the letter. It was on official HOA letterhead, printed in a font that looked suspiciously like Comic Sans. Notice of remedial action. Due to the homeowner refusal to address the blight on the property, the HOA board has voted to exercise its right to remedy the violation. We have hired a contractor to remove the dead and hazardous trees on Monday the 12th. The cost of $3,000 will be billed to your account. My blood ran cold. This was it. She was actually going to try it. I sent a certified letter back. This time, I was a little more specific. I wrote, I explicitly deny permission for anyone to enter my property. Any attempt to alter the landscaping will be considered trespassing and destruction of property. Legal action will follow. I did not mention the bats. Why? Because if I told her, she might try to do it sneakily. She might try to poison the trees. I needed to catch her in the act, but I also needed to protect the trees. So I called the local Fish and Wildlife Field Office. I spoke to an old buddy of mine, Agent Miller. I told Miller the situation. He laughed. He said, "Let her try. We need a win this quarter. Before we see how Patricia manages to ruin her own life, smash that like button." It lets me know that you want more stories about entitled people getting exactly what they deserve. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And have you ever dealt with a neighbor like this? Let me know. Monday the 12th arrived. I had to go to work. I work at a research lab about 30 minutes away, but in the modern age, you are never really away from home. I had cameras everywhere. I had a camera on the porch, a camera on the garage, and a 4,000 resolution camera pointed directly at the trees. At 9 a.m, my phone buzzed. Motion detected in backyard. I opened the app. A beat-up white truck had pulled onto my lawn. Not the driveway, the lawn. The side of the truck read, Dave and Sons Tree Service, in uneven stick-on letters. 2 guys in tank tops jumped out with chainsaws, and there, directing traffic like an admiral on the deck of a battleship, was Patricia. She was wearing a pink tracksuit and pointing aggressively at my ancient trees. My heart hammered in my chest. I hit the record button. I called the police non-emergency line to report a trespass in progress. Then, I called Agent Miller. "It is happening," I said. "On my way," Miller replied. I jumped in my car and sped home. Now, you have to understand something about cutting down trees of this size. It is not quick. You cannot just yell timber and watch it fall. You have to limb it up. You have to take it down in sections. It takes hours. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sound of chainsaws was deafening. Sawdust was floating in the air like snow. I ran to the back gate. Patricia was standing there, arms crossed, a smug smile plastered across her face. "You cannot go back there!" she shouted over the noise. "It is a construction zone. Insurance liability." I looked past her. One of the guys was halfway up the first tree. He had already cut off 3 major lower limbs. They were lying on the ground, crushing my ferns. "Patricia," I yelled, "stop them now!" She laughed. "It is too late, Jason. You had your chance. Now we are fixing it for you. You should be thanking me." I pulled out my phone. "I am calling the police. They are already here," she said, pointing to the street. Sure enough, a squad car rolled up. But it was just a local deputy. Patricia immediately went into victim mode. She ran over to the officer before he could even get out of the car. "Officer, officer, this man is harassing our contractors. We have a signed work order. We have the HOA covenants. He is being aggressive." The officer looked tired. He looked at me, then at Patricia. "Sir, is this a civil dispute?" "It is about to be a federal one," I said, my voice shaking with rage. But I stayed calm. "Officer," I said, "these men are trespassing. I am the property owner. I did not hire them. I want them off my land." The officer looked at Patricia. "Ma'am, if he is the owner and he says stop, they have to stop. You can take him to court for the bill, but you cannot just cut his trees down if he is standing here telling you no." Patricia puffed up like a toad. "We have the right. The bylaws say if a homeowner is negligent—" The officer held up a hand. "Ma'am, stop the saws." Patricia huffed, rolled her eyes, and waved at the guys. "Take 5, Dave." The chainsaws idled down. The silence that followed was heavy. I walked past Patricia, past the officer, and right up to the base of the tree. I looked at the severed limbs. I looked at the sap bleeding out of the ancient wood, and then a black SUV with government plates screeched into the driveway, blocking the tree truck in. 2 men got out. They were wearing field jackets with a very specific logo on the chest. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Agent Miller was in the lead. He looked like he ate nails for breakfast. He walked with a purpose that made the local deputy take a step back. "Who is in charge here?" Miller boomed. Patricia stepped forward, adjusting her glasses. I am the HOA President." "And who might you be?" "Special Agent Miller, Federal Wildlife Officer. We received a report of active destruction of critical habitat for an endangered species." Patricia blinked. Her brain could not compute the words. Endangered what? "Look, these are just ugly old trees. We are cleaning up the neighborhood." Miller ignored her. He walked over to the tree. He knelt down and picked up a piece of bark. He looked at the base of the tree. He pulled out a GPS unit and checked the coordinates. Then he looked up at the guy still up in the tree. "Get down, now, or I will have the fire department bring you down and you will go straight to a holding cell." The guy in the tree practically fell out of it in his haste to get down. "What is going on?" Patricia shrieked. "You cannot tell my contractors what to do. I demand to speak to your supervisor." Miller stood up and turned to face her. He was 6'4". Patricia was 5 nothing. "Ma'am," he said, his voice deadly calm, "these trees are a documented roosting site for Myotis sodalis, the Indiana bat. They are protected under the Endangered Species Act. Disturbance of this habitat is a federal offense." Patricia scoffed. "Bats? You are telling me I cannot cut down an ugly tree because of some flying rats? That is ridiculous. I am the HOA President. My authority supersedes—" Miller cut her off. "Your authority extends to the color of mailboxes, ma'am. It does not supersede federal law. You have just authorized the destruction of protected habitat. Do you know what the penalty is for that?" "Penalty?" Patricia laughed nervously. "I will just pay a fine. How much could it be? $100? Miller smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a shark that just found a seal. $50,000 per violation per person, plus up to 1 year in federal prison. And seeing as you have 3 men here, And you have damaged 3 limbs. Well, the math gets interesting. Patricia's face went pale. That is absurd. You are bluffing. Jason put you up to this. This is a prank. Miller turned to the local deputy. Officer, I am seizing this site as a federal crime scene. I need you to detain this woman and these 3 workers for questioning. Do not let them leave. The deputy, realizing this was way above his pay grade but happy to see Patricia sweating, nodded. Yes, sir. Patricia started screaming, You cannot arrest me. I live here. I am on the board. Miller ignored her. He walked over to Dave, the owner of the tree service. Do you have a license to operate in this county? Dave looked at his boots. It is pending. Do you have insurance? Dave shook his head. Did you check for environmental encumbrances before you started cutting on a residential lot backing a wetland? No, sir. Oh, she said it was fine. She said she was the boss. Miller pulled out a notepad. Well, Dave, you just committed a felony conspiracy. I hope you saved your money. For the next 4 hours, my backyard was a circus. More agents arrived. They took photos. They measured the limbs. They collected sawdust samples. They interviewed me. I gave them copies of every letter, every email, every fine Patricia had sent me. I gave them the certified letter where I explicitly denied permission. That letter was the nail in the coffin. It proved premeditation. It proved she knew I opposed it and did it anyway. Patricia was not arrested in handcuffs right then and there, but she was cited and released. She had to surrender her passport. She was told not to leave the state. The tree service truck was impounded as evidence used in the commission of a crime. But the real fun was just beginning. If you are enjoying watching this entitlement get crushed, hit the like button. It shows me that you appreciate sweet revenge just as much as I do. The fallout was nuclear. First came the fines. The EPA and the Fish and Wildlife Service do not mess around. They assess the damage. Because the trees were damaged during active roosting season, the fines were maximized. The tree service was hit with $150,000 in fines. Dave went bankrupt immediately. His business was gone. The HOA was named as a co-conspirator because Patricia acted in her official capacity as president, using HOA funds to hire the crew. The fine levied against the HOA was $250,000. $250,000. Our HOA reserve fund had about $12,000 in it. This meant a special assessment. Every single homeowner in the neighborhood received a bill for roughly $4,000 to cover the fine caused by Patricia's vendetta. You can imagine how popular Patricia became. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. Usually 3 people show up. This time, the entire neighborhood was there, and they had pitchforks. Metaphorically speaking, of course. Patricia tried to preside over the meeting. She banged her little gavel. Order, order. We need to discuss a payment plan for this unjust government overreach. A guy from 3 doors down stood up. He was a quiet guy, usually. Not today. Unjust? He yelled. You trespassed on private property. You broke federal law. And now you want me to pay $4 grand because you do not like trees? I move for an immediate vote of no confidence to remove the president. I second that, shouted Mrs. Higgins, an 80-year-old lady who usually just brought cookies. The vote was unanimous. Patricia was stripped of her title instantly. She tried to argue, but the crowd booed her into silence. It was beautiful, but the government was not done with her. The criminal charges came down 3 months later. Because I had the video evidence of her directing the crew and the paper trail showing her malice, the U.S. attorney decided to make an example of her. She was charged with violating the Endangered Species Act and conspiracy to commit a federal offense. She pleaded guilty to avoid a trial. Her lawyer probably told her that a jury would hate her. The sentence: 6 months of house arrest, 3 years of probation, and a personal restitution payment of $75,000 to a bat conservation fund. She had to sell her house to pay the legal fees and the restitution. The day she moved out was the best day of my life. I sat on my front porch, sipping iced tea, watching the movers load her beige furniture into a truck. She came out carrying a box of her precious garden gnomes. She looked at me. She looked tired, defeated. The inverted bob was grown out and messy. "I hope you are happy," she spat. "You ruined this neighborhood." I took a sip of tea. "Actually, Patricia, property values have gone up since the HOA was disbanded." "Oh, did I not mention? We voted to dissolve the HOA completely last week. Nobody wanted to risk another Patricia." She turned purple. You, have a safe trip," I called out. "Watch out for bats." She got in her car and drove away. As for the trees, they survived. We had to call in a real arborist to clean up the cuts and seal the wounds, but the root systems were strong. The next spring, the bats came back. I sat on my back deck at twilight, watching them swoop and dive, catching mosquitoes. It turns out the most dangerous thing in the suburbs is not the wild animals. It is a bored woman with a clipboard and a little bit of power. But even she was no match for the United States government and a guy who knows how to keep his mouth shut until the trap is snapped shut. So, the lesson here is simple. If you are going to go to war with your neighbor, make sure you know what is in their backyard. And never, ever mess with federal wildlife. Because Uncle Sam does not care about your property values, but he cares a whole lot about his bats. And frankly, so do I.